There is a moment, and if you have lived long enough, you know exactly which moment this is, where everything inside you screams. Where the injustice is so raw, so fresh, so close to the surface of your skin that staying quiet feels like swallowing broken glass. Someone has wronged you. Someone has lied about you, used you, discarded you, embarrassed you, or stolen something from you that you can never fully get back. And every nerve in your body is firing at once, demanding that you respond. That you defend yourself. That you make them feel what they made you feel. That you stand up, speak up, and let the world know exactly what happened and exactly who is responsible. The silence feels like surrender. It feels like weakness. It feels like letting them win. But what if the silence was not surrender? What if the silence was the weapon? What if the most devastating, the most powerful, the most unshakable thing you could ever do, in the face of someone who wronged you, was to say absolutely nothing? Not because you are afraid. Not because you have no words. But because you understand something they do not. Because you have learned what the ancient Stoics spent lifetimes trying to teach, that the universe has its own way of settling accounts. That time is never neutral. That every action taken in darkness eventually surfaces in light. And that the person who waits, who works, who stays grounded in their own character while the storm rages around them, that person is never truly defeated. This is not a call to become a doormat. This is not about swallowing your pain in silence and pretending nothing happened. This is about understanding the mechanics of karma, not as mystical wishful thinking, but as the very real, very observable law of consequence that governs every human life. It is about understanding the Stoic philosophy of control, of virtue, of responding to the chaos of the world not with more chaos, but with something the Stoics considered the highest form of human strength: stillness. Deliberate, intentional, devastating stillness. The Stoics were not soft people. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire. Epictetus survived slavery. Seneca navigated the treachery of Roman courts where one wrong word could cost you everything. These were people who understood cruelty, betrayal, injustice, and loss at a depth most of us will never be required to face. And yet every one of them arrived at the same conclusion: that your power, your real power, is never diminished by what someone does to you. It is only ever diminished by how you respond. Before we go any further, if this channel has ever given you something worth keeping, a thought that changed how you saw your life, a story that shifted something in you, a piece of wisdom you carried into a hard morning, subscribe right now. Hit that button. Because what we are building here, together, is a community of people who refuse to be broken by the ordinary cruelties of human life. You belong here. And there is so much more coming. Now, here are the 7 times you should stay silent and let karma handle it. Number 1. Stay silent when someone betrays you. There is nothing in the entire catalog of human suffering that quite compares to betrayal. Not failure. Not loss. Not even grief, because grief, as devastating as it is, has a clear cause. Someone or something you loved is gone, and the world makes enough sense to tell you why you are hurting. But betrayal is different. Betrayal is a wound that does not announce itself honestly. It comes disguised as trust. It enters through a door you opened willingly, a door you kept open because you believed in someone. When the full weight of it lands on you, when the evidence is undeniable, when the story collapses and the truth underneath it is uglier than anything you imagined, there is a particular silence that falls over you. Not the peace of quiet. The silence of something shattering. The natural, instinctive response to betrayal is to confront. To expose. To go after the person who did this with every piece of evidence, every piece of your pain, and make absolutely certain that they understand what they have done. There is a part of the mind that genuinely believes that if you can just say it loudly enough, clearly enough, convincingly enough, something will be made right. But ask yourself honestly, how often does that actually happen? How often does the confrontation deliver what you imagined? Almost never. Because the person who betrayed you has already demonstrated something critical about their character. They will minimize. They will deflect. They will turn the confrontation into evidence that you are unstable and emotional. They will weaponize your pain and use it against you. Epictetus wrote that people are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the opinions they hold about those things. What he was pointing to was the gap, the critical, life-changing gap, between what happens to you and the story you start telling yourself about what it means. That you were stupid for trusting. That you should have seen it coming. That you are the kind of person this always happens to. And it is not the betrayal itself that hollows you out. It is that second story. The one you repeat in the dark at 3 in the morning until it becomes the thing that defines you. Silence, real, deliberate Stoic silence, interrupts that narrative. It is the silence of a person who decides they will not allow this event to write the next chapter of their life. It is the silence of someone who says, I see what happened. I feel what happened. And I am going to let the law of consequence take this from here, because I have work to do. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal inside his own court. Men he had promoted and trusted used their access to him for personal gain. And what does history record of his response? Not tantrums. Not public campaigns of revenge. What history records is a man who returned, again and again, to the same fundamental question: am I living according to my own values? Is my character intact? Because Marcus understood that a leader who chases betrayers in fury has already lost something more important than whatever was stolen. He has lost the stillness from which all real power flows. The karma that follows betrayal does not always arrive on a schedule you can see. That is the hardest part. You want the accounting to happen now, publicly, in a way that is unmistakably clear. But karma operates on its own timeline, and it is ruthless in the long run even when it seems lenient in the short one. The person who betrayed you is not carrying what they did as a light thing. The character that made them capable of that betrayal is active inside them every single day. It is operating in their other relationships. It is quietly undermining every trust extended to them. It is building a pattern the world will eventually recognize, even if not today. And you, if you stay silent, if you stay clean, if you refuse to descend into bitterness, you are protecting something in yourself that nothing they do can touch. Stay silent. Do your work. Let karma handle the rest. Number 2. Stay silent when you are publicly criticized or attacked. Understand something about criticism in the modern world. It has never been cheaper, louder, or more accessible. There was a time when tearing someone down publicly meant standing in a room, looking people in the eye, and speaking their name, with a social cost, with a vulnerability. That time is largely gone. Now someone can dismantle you from a comfortable distance, with complete anonymity if they choose, in front of an audience of thousands, in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. And the attack does not have to be fair, accurate, or proportional to anything you have actually done. It just has to be compelling enough to capture attention for the few seconds the algorithm requires. The instinct when you are publicly attacked is to respond immediately. To correct the record. To fight back with your own evidence and your own argument. And sometimes, a response is the right call. There are situations where silence reads as admission. Where the record needs to be corrected not out of ego but out of factual necessity. But most of the time, in most public criticisms, the Stoic instinct is not to engage, it is to observe. To ask a completely different question than the one the attacker wants you to ask. The attacker wants you to ask, how do I defend myself? Because the moment you start asking that question, you have already accepted the framing. You have stepped into the arena they designed, on the terms they set, with the crowd they chose as your jury. And in that arena, you almost always lose something, even if you win the argument. Because now your energy is there, in their arena, instead of in the work that actually matters. The question the Stoics would have you ask is different. They would want you to ask, is this criticism true? Not. Is it fair? Not. Is it kind? Just, is it true? If it is true, if buried inside the attack, even inside the exaggeration and the malice, there is something accurate, then the Stoic response is not defense. It is to take the information. Extract the useful kernel from the hostile delivery and apply it quietly. If the criticism is not true, if it is pure fabrication, projection, or the overflow of someone else's bitterness, then the Stoic response is also not defense. It is indifference. Real, grounded, unperformed indifference. Here is what the Stoics understood and what modern psychology has confirmed repeatedly. Responding to false criticism does not make it disappear. It amplifies it. It gives the criticism oxygen. It tells the algorithm and the crowd that this is a story worth following. Every response you make transforms a passing comment into an ongoing controversy. Your silence, on the other hand, is a wall. It gives the criticism nowhere to go. It starves the fire. And eventually, without your engagement feeding it, the fire burns itself out. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. When someone attacks you, your mind immediately constructs the worst possible scenario. Everyone is reading this. Everyone believes it. Your reputation is destroyed. The imagination catastrophizes. But the reality is almost always far smaller. Most people are not paying close attention. Most will have forgotten the attack within 48 hours. The wound you are nursing in private is often far larger than the actual damage that has occurred in public. Marcus Aurelius described what he called the view from above, the practice of looking at your life not from the hot, immediate perspective of the wounded self, but from a higher altitude. From the perspective of time. 5 years from now, looking back at this moment, will this public criticism be the thing that defined you? Or will it be a small, mostly forgotten bump in a much larger road you built with your own hands? Almost always, from that altitude, the criticism looks smaller. The response looks less urgent. The silence looks less like surrender and more like wisdom. Stay silent. Let the work be the only response that matters. Number 3. Stay silent when someone takes credit for your work. This one carries a specific pain. A particular flavor of injustice that lives at the intersection of professional life and personal pride. You did the work. You spent the nights and the early mornings. You brought the idea, built the foundation, carried the weight through the parts no one saw. And then, in the meeting, in the announcement, in the public record, someone else's name is attached to it. Someone else is receiving the recognition, the advancement, the credit that belongs to you. The natural response is to correct the record. To reclaim what is yours. And sometimes that is the necessary thing. In professional situations where the record needs to be accurate not for pride but for future opportunity, where staying silent about your contributions has real material consequences for your livelihood. In those situations, speaking up, calmly, factually, with composure, is not a violation of Stoic principles. It is the appropriate assertion of truth. But most instances of credit theft do not live in that category. Most of them live in the in-between space. The meeting where someone rephrased your idea and it landed as theirs. The project where your contribution was buried by someone else's visibility. And in those situations, the Stoic practice of silence is far more powerful than you might expect. Marcus Aurelius wrote, in his private meditations, about doing good and then releasing it. About the danger of performing virtue only when there is someone watching who will give you credit. He was pointing at something most of us do not want to fully confront. That the desperate need to be seen for your contribution means the contribution was never purely about the work. It was always also about the audience. The person who steals credit is, without exception, building on sand. They are constructing a professional reputation on a foundation of borrowed work. And that foundation has a physics problem. It cannot support ongoing performance, because the performance was never theirs. Every time they are placed in a position to do the work they claimed, the gap becomes visible. Not to everyone. Not immediately. But to the people who are paying close attention, and there are always people paying close attention. Meanwhile, you continue doing the work. Not for the applause, not for the recognition, but because doing excellent work is your character. And the compounding effect of someone who quietly, consistently, reliably produces quality, without politics, without performance, without campaigns to make sure everyone knows their contribution, that compounding effect is one of the most powerful forces in any career. Real quality is not invisible forever. It is only invisible in the short term, while louder, flashier, politically smarter but shallower people capture the initial attention. The karma of credit theft is one of the most reliable in professional life. The person who borrows your work must also borrow your expected standard of performance. And at some point, the expectation exceeds the capacity to deliver. The credit runs out. The gap becomes impossible to paper over. And the people who were watching all along make a very quiet, very permanent reassessment. Stay in your craft. Keep building. Let the work be the testimony. Number 4. Stay silent when a relationship ends badly. There is a particular grief that attaches itself to the end of a relationship, any relationship, not just romantic ones. The end of a friendship that meant everything. The dissolution of a partnership built over years. The fracture of a family bond you thought was permanent. When these things end, especially when they end in ways that feel unfair, when you are leaving with less than you brought, when the other person has a story about you that does not match who you know yourself to be, the impulse to have the last word is overwhelming. To make them understand, once and for all, what they meant to you and what you believe they did wrong. To have the conversation that settles everything, that lands on some clean and mutually agreed upon version of events. That conversation almost never happens the way you imagine it. And yet we keep seeking it because we confuse closure with resolution. We think that if we can just say the right words in the right way, we will feel better. We will feel seen. But closure is not something another person can give you. This is one of the most painful and also most liberating truths about human relationships. The ending of a relationship does not require the other person's cooperation to process. You do not need them to agree with your account of what happened. You do not need them to validate your pain or deliver the verdict you are seeking. Seneca wrote about the way grief and loss are compounded by resistance, by the mind's refusal to accept that something is gone. He wrote that suffering is not in the thing itself, but in the added torment of wrestling with it beyond its natural weight. What he was pointing to is the loop. The mental loop of replaying the relationship, the ending, the arguments, the what-ifs, looking for the thing you could say or do that would change the outcome. That loop is not processing. It is not healing. It is a form of suffering you are choosing, however unconsciously, in place of the much harder but ultimately more merciful work of letting go. Silence, in the aftermath of a relationship ending badly, is the practice of stepping out of the loop. It is the decision to stop sending the messages you draft at midnight. To stop rehearsing the speech you will give if you run into them. To stop monitoring their life from a distance, looking for evidence that they are suffering the way you are. It is the radical act of releasing the need to be understood by a specific person, and choosing instead to invest that energy in building forward. The Stoics never claimed this was simple. Epictetus, who had everything taken from him repeatedly, was clear that the path of Stoic discipline requires constant effort. That it goes against the grain of the reactive, comfort-seeking mind. The practice of silence in the aftermath of a bad ending is not passive. It is an active, ongoing choice you make over and over again, every time the urge to reach out rises, every time the loop starts playing, every time the grievance freshens itself. And here is what happens when you maintain this practice. The relationship begins to settle into its right size. Not its old size. Not the inflated size it took on when it ended badly. Its actual, accurate size, a thing that was in your life for a period of time, that had meaning, that also hurt you, and that is now over. Not a definition of you. Not a verdict on your worth. Not an ongoing emergency. Just something that happened, and something you are now moving beyond. The silence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of your recovery. Number 5. Stay silent when someone is spreading lies about you. This one lives at the intersection of pride, reputation, and very real stakes. Lies, when they spread, are not abstract. They can damage friendships. They can affect professional opportunities. They can change the way people who matter to you look at you before they have had the chance to form their own assessment. The fear that runs through you when you discover that someone has been spreading falsehoods about your character is not irrational. It is a fear rooted in something real. And so the question of whether to stay silent here is more complex. Because unlike public criticism, which often burns itself out without sustained engagement, A sustained private whispering campaign about your character can do its damage quietly, without giving you the opportunity to confront it directly. But here is what the Stoics understood, and what human social dynamics confirm: the liar's most powerful asset is your panic. When the person spreading lies senses that you are reactive, that you are frantically reaching out to mutual contacts to defend yourself, pulling people aside at gatherings to correct the record, sending long messages of self-justification to people who barely asked a question, they have exactly the information they need. They know their effort is working. They know you are destabilized. And the more destabilized you appear, the more the casual observers in your network start to wonder if there is something to the story after all. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is to be unlike the person who caused the injury. The person spreading lies about you is operating from dishonesty, malice, and the cowardice of attacking someone from behind instead of confronting them directly. These characteristics are on display, even if only a few people can see them clearly right now. The best thing you can do, for your reputation, your relationships, and the quality of your own life, is to be so visibly, consistently, undeniably unlike those characteristics that the lie cannot find purchase in the people who actually know you. This requires trusting something that is difficult to trust in the middle of it: the intelligence of the people around you. Most people, given enough time and exposure, are capable of assessing character. They may be temporarily misled by a well-told story. But over time, people tend to arrive at accurate assessments of who their social contacts really are. The liar in your network is not just lying about you. They are revealing themselves every time they do it. And the people around them are collecting data, even when they seem not to be. The silence here is not total. It is not the silence of refusing to speak to close friends who come to you genuinely asking for clarification. If someone you trust says, "I heard something and wanted to ask you directly," that is an invitation to speak, calmly and without excess emotion, with the truth. Not defensively. Not desperately. Short, clear, and confident. The difference between this and frantic self-defense is everything. One communicates groundedness. The other communicates alarm. And alarm, in the face of false accusations, paradoxically makes the accusations more interesting. The karma that finds the person spreading lies about you is one of the most reliably observable forms of consequence in human social life. Because lying requires maintenance. You have to remember what you said, to whom, in what context. You have to manage the risk of contradictions surfacing. And because lying about someone is almost always rooted in something the liar needs: superiority, relevance, displacement of their own failures, it is sustainable only as long as that need is burning. Eventually the need shifts. And when they stop maintaining the story begins to unravel. The inconsistencies surface. The people who are told one version compare notes with those told another. Stay grounded. Stay visible in your actual character. And trust that truth has a specific gravity that falsehood lacks. It always settles lower. It always finds the floor. If you are watching this right now and living through exactly this scenario, subscribe to this channel right now. Because you are going to need more of this. We keep coming back to these ideas, going deeper into the Stoic toolkit for navigating the hardest parts of human life. Subscribe and stay close. This community is here for exactly this. Number 6. Stay silent when you have been wronged by someone in power. This is the most practically difficult of all 7 situations, because the dynamics of power asymmetry change the equation in ways the other scenarios do not. When someone with significantly more power than you, an employer, an institution, a person with a larger platform or deeper social roots, wrongs you, the advice to stay silent and let karma handle it can sound like an instruction to simply accept injustice. Let us be completely clear, that is not what this is. Epictetus was a slave. Before he became one of the most influential philosophers in the Roman world, he was property. He had no legal rights. He was subject to the total authority of another person who could, and reportedly did, physically harm him. When Epictetus speaks about what is and is not within our control, he is not speaking from the comfort of privilege. He is speaking from the floor of the most extreme power imbalance that human society has institutionalized. And even from there, especially from there, he arrived at the conclusion that the freedom of his own mind was something no external authority could take from him. The Stoic position on power is this: no matter how much someone controls about your external circumstances, your job, your income, your reputation within a particular community, they do not have power over the one thing that constitutes your real self. Your judgment. Your character. Your choice about who you will be in response to what is done to you. And the person in power who wrongs you is counting, often very consciously, on the assumption that their power over your external circumstances translates into power over that internal domain. Strategic silence in this situation is about preserving your ammunition, about choosing the moment of your response, if a response is warranted, rather than letting the moment choose you. If you react immediately, publicly, emotionally, without preparation, you give them exactly what they need to dismiss you. You become the unstable employee, the difficult client, the troublesome person who cannot handle criticism. You hand them the narrative they need to justify whatever they did to you. Strategic silence means asking, what is the most effective way to respond to this injustice? And is this moment the right moment? Sometimes the most effective response is documentation, quietly, carefully building a record of what happened, because records speak louder than emotional confrontations and are harder to dismiss. Sometimes it is finding legitimate channels of recourse and using them methodically. Sometimes it is removing yourself from the situation entirely, finding a different job, a different community, which, while painful, denies the powerful person the thing they may want most, your continued presence as a subject of their power. Sometimes the strategic silence is temporary because the moment has not yet arrived. Because the wrong done to you is not an isolated incident, it is part of a pattern. And patterns, when documented and witnessed, become evidence. The powerful person who wrongs you today will wrong someone else tomorrow. They will build a record of behavior that, over time, becomes impossible to protect. History is filled with these stories, the powerful protecting themselves in the short term, only to find the short term was shorter than they imagined. The karma of abused power is one of the most consistent forces in human history. Power used cruelly, used to silence and diminish people who deserved better, always turns against itself eventually. Sometimes it is the people who were wronged finding their moment and their voice. Sometimes it is simple overreach, the entitled certainty that the rules do not apply to you, leading to the mistake that unravels everything. Be patient. Be precise. Be strategic. And trust that the law of consequence is not subject to the authority of powerful people. It moves at its own pace, in its own way, and it always arrives. Number 7. Stay silent when someone disrespects you in public. There is something about public humiliation that activates something ancient and ferocious in the human psyche. It does not matter how evolved you believe yourself to be, how thoroughly you have internalized the Stoic principles you are learning about in this video right now. When someone disrespects you in front of other people, demeans you, dismisses you, mocks you, talks over you, or treats you as though your presence in the room is an inconvenience, there is a physical response. Your heart rate rises. Your jaw sets. Something very deep and very old in your nervous system registers this as a survival threat and mobilizes everything it has to defend you. The problem is that the action your nervous system wants to take, the immediate, decisive, public defense of your dignity, is almost never the action that actually defends your dignity. What it usually does is escalate. It turns a moment that might have passed into a confrontation that now has an audience invested in the outcome. It creates a spectacle in which two people are competing for the crowd's approval, and in which the original disrespect is just the opening act of a much longer drama. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoic philosophy, was a merchant who lost everything in a shipwreck and found himself stranded in Athens with no social standing, no prestigious family, no powerful city behind him. He spent years studying under teachers who sometimes treated him dismissively. And what he built from that position, from the margins, from a place of social vulnerability, from the experience of being underestimated, became the most durable and influential philosophical school in Western history. The response to underestimation was not a campaign to be taken seriously. It was simply work. Simply becoming, quietly and undeniably, the thing they had underestimated. When someone disrespects you publicly, they are making a bet. They are betting that you are the kind of person who will react, who will get flustered, who will say something impulsive that embarrasses you further and gives the onlookers a better story than the original disrespect. They are also, in many cases, revealing something about their own need in that moment. People who disrespect others publicly are almost always managing a private insecurity. The bravado of public contempt is almost always proportional to the private fear underneath it. The Stoic response, and this requires genuine practice because it cuts against every instinct, is composure. Not brittle, forced composure that everyone can see through. Real composure. The kind that comes from a person who is genuinely clear on who they are, genuinely secure in their own worth, genuinely unbothered by the social theater of someone else's ego performance. This kind of composure is not something you fake. It is something you build slowly, through the repeated practice of the principles we are discussing here. The practice of locating your self-worth in your own character rather than in the mirror of other people's opinions. The audience watching the exchange is not just watching how you respond. They are drawing conclusions about both of you simultaneously. About the kind of person who disrespects others publicly and what that says about their character. And about the kind of person who receives disrespect with composure and what that stillness says about theirs. You do not have to argue the case. Your behavior in that moment is the argument, and composure is the most persuasive argument you can make. The composure does not have to be final. In private, with the person directly, at a time of your choosing, that is the appropriate place to address what happened, if it needs to be addressed. Not in the heat of the public moment, where you are performing for an audience and the other person's defenses are fully engaged, but later. In a context where a real conversation is possible, where the outcome is resolution rather than spectacle. The karma that finds the person who publicly humiliates others is one of the most socially visible forms of consequence there is. The person who needs to elevate themselves by diminishing others will need to do it more and more frequently as the underlying insecurity grows. They will lose relationships. They will create enemies from people who might have been allies. They will build a reputation, through the accumulation of 100 small moments just like the one they created with you, of someone who is not safe to be around. Meanwhile, you, the person who stood still in the public moment, who chose composure over conflict, demonstrated something genuinely rare. Something people notice and remember. Something that, over time, builds a quiet authority that no amount of loudness can match. Stay still. Stay composed. Let karma write the next chapter. It would be easier to abandon it. In the moments where you chose not to send the message, not to make the scene, not to chase the confrontation that would have given you temporary satisfaction and cost you something lasting. In the accumulation of those choices over a life, in the person you become through the practicing of them. The Stoics built their philosophy in the dust and blood of the ancient world. In empires and slavery and poverty and war and the full, unmedicated weight of human cruelty and human loss. They were not philosophers of comfort. They were philosophers of endurance, of the specific kind of courage that shows up not on a battlefield but in the quiet moments of human life where you decide, one more time, who you are going to be. Where you choose, one more time, to protect the center. Where you say, one more time, to the world's provocations, not today. That is the philosophy. That is the practice. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of what you are facing. If this video gave you something, if one of these 7 situations is something you are living right now, if something here shifted the way you are thinking about your own life, please do one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Not as a favor. Not out of obligation. But because this community is built for exactly this work. For the people who have decided they are going to understand their lives at a deeper level. For the people who are choosing, one difficult moment at a time, to be something worth being. Subscribe. Leave a comment below. Tell us which of the 7 situations you are facing right now, or which one has marked your life most deeply. Let us keep going, together. There is so much more ahead. The Stoics would tell you, you already have everything you need. The capacity for wisdom, for restraint, for genuine virtue, it is not something you acquire from outside. It is something you uncover slowly, by removing what is not you. The reactive patterns, the need for approval, the grip on outcomes you cannot control. Remove those layer by layer, practice by practice, silent choice by silent choice, and what is left is the person you actually were all along. Stay still. Stay grounded. Let karma handle it. And keep watching.